Our gospel for today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, the 5th chapter. Jesus said to the disciples, "You have heard it was said in those ancient times, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment.' But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. For if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire. So, when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on your way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown in prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It is also said, 'Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce.' But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard it was said in those ancient times, 'You should not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord.' But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one." This is the gospel of the Lord. Holy God, give us grace to open our hearts and minds to hear your true and living word, Jesus the Christ, who will transform our lives. Amen. In 1737, in his workshop in Lyon, France, Jacques de Vaucanson decided to make an automaton, a robot, basically. His initial idea was to make an android to serve dinner or clear tables for visiting politicians. A government official took a rather dim view of this, and Vaucanson switched it up and then made a life-size figure of a shepherd that played a small drum and a flute. Mechanical creatures were a fad in Europe about this time, and many were mere toys. But Vaucanson approached his with sophistication. His masterpiece was called the digesting duck. It had over 400 moving parts in each wing alone. It was covered in a gold-plated copper and could flap its wings, drink water, seemingly digest grain, and in a moment of boyish humor, he even made it seem like it could, poop. He said, "It does look like a duck, albeit a gilded copper one. And yes, it does quack. And yes, it flaps its wings, drinks water, and eats food. And yes, foul-smelling effluent does pour forth from its metal cloaca. Heavens, I declare it must be a duck, by crikey." Anyway, this is the origin of the saying, if it walks like a duck, or what we call the duck test, but does something that only goes through the motions of something else, actually be something else. Was the mechanical duck really a duck? This is a bit of what Jesus is taking on in the gospel reading today. It's a theme that runs throughout our readings today. If we go through the motions of obeying the commandments, we're good, right? It seems like we like rules and legalism. We like to point to the fifth commandment and be able to say, well, I've never killed anybody. Or to the seventh commandment and say, well, I've never really stolen anything. Okay, I might fudge on my taxes or pocket the occasional pack of gum at the dollar store, but not really steal? No. Or the third commandment. I'm down with going to church. I remember the Sabbath day when I go to church whenever there isn't a game on or unless I need to sleep in. We like rules because we like to squeak by them, by going through the motions. I ask my confirmation students, what makes someone a Christian? And I always get, goes to church as an answer. Then I ask them, does standing in the garage make you a car? Matthew presents Jesus' Sermon on the Mount at the beginning of his gospel as a primer and an encapsulation of all of Jesus' teachings. 2 weeks ago, we heard the Beatitudes, blessed are, which lay out some of the ways in which we can connect and align ourselves with God. Last week, Jesus told us, blessed us with these words, that we are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Us, we, the meek, the humble, the poor of spirit, the mourning, the merciful. We are the ones who can bring light and flavor and nourishment and love to a broken world. That left us feeling pretty good, didn't it? Well, in this reading, Jesus goes on. He directly addresses the law, the laws, the Torah, the commandments, because he knows us. Jesus gets us. He knows that we try to skate by on the laws. So he says, it's not just following the commandments outwardly, but we need to internalize them. It's not only our behaviors that are important, but it's our attitudes and our emotions. Don't kill, don't even hate. Don't commit adultery, don't even look with lust. Because Jesus knows our propensity for deluding ourselves, that we're good so long as we stay mostly good. We will pat ourselves on the back for not committing murder, but gleefully ruin the reputation of a coworker through our words. Or we will hold our noses high in the air about never becoming addicted to drugs, but are addicted to gossip, which destroys even more lives. As Jesus said, he didn't come to replace the laws. He came to fulfill them, to make them complete, to fully keep them, as our psalm says, to transform us from the inward to the outward, so that we are not only outwardly following the commandments, but that we've internalized the attitudes and the emotions of them. No longer do teachings on murder and adultery apply strictly to acts of murder or infidelity. They're an invitation to examine the internal mechanisms that govern our responses. The teachings become a way to examine what is the heart of our anger, our derision, our arrogance, our slander, our temptations, our alienation, our speech. His teachings then extend, develop, uphold an ethic of trust and compassion that he expects will or should pervade the community. So what would Jesus think of our divisive culture today? We're rampant with hostility to others in the form of verbal abuse, condescension, slander, always twisting somebody else's words to make them seem foolish. These things are damaging and just as worthy of punishment as murder, according to Jesus. Wouldn't matter whether they were from that other party or not. We are not followers of Christ only for our sakes, but we are followers of Christ for the sake of others as well. We are accountable for the good of the community. Whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. And that includes ignoring or demeaning what they say. So if we are to be salt and light for the world, we have to start with ourselves. We always want others to stop calling us names before we do. But that's not the way of Jesus. We step up for others. We stand up for others before ourselves. Even if we don't agree with them, we still politely, gently, but firmly don't let others speak ill of them as well. Because when we do that, we will know that we have internalized the ethic of Jesus. We can check ourselves every time we hear someone we don't agree with or says something that we don't like. Do we respond with anger or name-calling or slurs? Or do we respond with compassion? I wonder what they went through to cause them to say or do that. Do we knee-jerk negatively or compassionately? Now, we should look at the commandments not as a restrictive set of rules to be followed, but rather as a way to call us into a relationship, to be closer to Jesus' way. Jesus would have us live lives more active and more complete, defined by the love of God and the love of neighbor. The state of our heart and our soul is just as important as the actions of our bodies. This week's text, then, is this. It's not enough just to refrain from murder. We should also treat each other with respect, and that means not speaking hateful words. Broken and tension-filled relationships are alarmingly common. Our shortcomings leave a trail of hurt and harm, even if we don't intend it. It's not enough to avoid physically committing adultery. We should also not objectify other persons by seeing them as a means to satisfy our physical desires by lusting after them. It is a sinful, hidden heart that embraces vice and crowds out love. It's not enough to follow the letter of the law regarding divorce. We should not treat people as disposable, and should make sure that the most vulnerable, and in this culture that often meant women and children, we have to make sure that the most vulnerable are provided for. And it's not enough to keep ourselves from swearing falsely or lying to others. We should speak and act truthfully in all our dealings so that we don't need to make oaths at all. So what would happen if we really left our offerings at the altar before we slumped off to reconcile and forgive all the people that we have harmed? We'd never get to communion, would we? Our gifts cannot offset the damage done in our broken relationships. And only by changing our attitudes and emotions can we help uphold that ethic of trust and compassion. So are we followers of Christ? Do we walk the walk? Do we speak the speak? Do we act like one? Or are we automatons, going through the motions, going to church, condemning others, putting on our holier-than-thou respectability? Do we actively seek out reconciliation and offer forgiveness? Do we treat others as fellow humans and not commodities to be objectified and used for our purposes? Do we use our gift of speech to build up others and our gift of listening to honor others? Or does a foul-smelling effluent pour forth from our mouths? We often think that if we just have our beliefs right, our actions will follow. But the truth of the matter is that if we concentrate on making our actions adhere to that ethic of trust and compassion, our beliefs will follow, and our attitudes and emotions will change. We will live our way into a new way of being. Amen.